the idea that Betty and Barney had been abducted by space aliens who were visiting this planet.
Don't you think also that the view of the person directing the hypnosis, no matter what their real-world experience is, that if they can't even fathom that something could exist, that skepticism is directing their inquiry?
Oh, it absolutely was directing Dr. Simon's inquiry. And often hypnotherapists today are criticized for leading the witness to an abduction. On the contrary, Dr. Simon led Betty and Barney away from an abduction. He attempted to find any possible explanation for the statements that they made about their UFO abduction.
Now, what about Betty's nightmares about being taken aboard the craft and the beeping sounds? It was my understanding that this happened also before the abduction. Did I get that right?
Oh, no.
Okay. It was after.
Before the abduction. It was after Betty and Barney's close encounter in New Hampshire's White Mountains that she had the nightmares. They occurred 5 nights in a row, and it was about 2 weeks after their close encounter. And that was it. She didn't have any more nightmares until she was undergoing hypnoanalysis with Dr. Simon.
It seemed to be there were a lot of players, formal players involved in military operations. J. Allen Hynek was involved in the fold. Obviously, there was a concerted effort to investigate it seriously, even if there was another concerted effort to make them think it was just a psychological episode that they both had.
That is very true. Allen Hynek, Dr. James Harder from APRO was very interested in the case. Also, you have the military who were involved formally and informally. There was Walter Webb, who was the investigator. Then we had C.D. Jackson, who came onto the scene, and also James McDonald, who was from Pease Air Force Base, who suddenly became Barney's best friend, and who had actually been in the CIA. He said that he was no longer with the CIA at that time. You had Ben Sweat, who was an officer at Pease Air Force Base, who was also a hypnotist that Betty and Barney confided in, and who helped them through all of this emotionally. Betty and Barney took their hypnosis tapes to him, finally, when their sessions had ended, and he listened to them and gave Betty and Barney emotional support, particularly Barney, through all of this. So, yes, there were a lot of major players here.
What happened to Delcy, their dog?
Well, on the night of the encounter, Delcy, as I said, her ears were perked up while the beeping or buzzing sounds were striking the trunk of the car. She was shaking and very frightened, it seemed, when first Barney returned to the car, and then Betty came down the path after that. According to the hypnosis, that wasn't part of her dream. They came at the same time, but under hypnosis, they arrived separately. Delcy was very frightened, needed to be comforted. When they arrived home, Delcy, for some reason, developed a severe fungus infection of her skin. They weren't aware that she had one before that. Also, she seemed to be having nightmares. Betty said that this was pretty new for Delcy, and she would woof, and her little legs would run in her sleep. So Betty felt that Delcy was experiencing some physical and some emotional impact from this.
After all of these many years of investigation and being so close and involved with the family for which this happened, what is your take on what's going on? Obviously, we have abduction reports now all over the world, millions of them. What is going on in your perspective?
I think that it's probably a longitudinal, at least genetic study of humans. I think that it might even be a little more than that. It seems that through the 60s and 70s, in those early abductions, there was a modus operandi that the ETs seemed to follow. They would approach a car on a highway or a person who was outside or near their vehicle. The craft would be seen. Oftentimes, the craft's occupants would be seen. The individuals in the car would either be taken out of the car, or the car itself would actually be picked up and taken into the craft. And the people were given all pretty much the same type of physical examination. Their skeletal structure would be examined, skin samples would be taken, or skin scrapings, samples from different areas of their bodies, probably ova would be removed, and a sperm sample would be taken. Into the 80s, that seemed to start changing, where people began to be abducted from their own homes. They might be sleeping. They might be abducted in the middle of the night from their bedrooms. And there was far less evidence than there was in these first abductions that were taking place. And I think that the whole operation became probably broader and more surreptitious than it was initially. I think there was also more of an effort to protect the individuals emotionally from the abduction experience by the extraterrestrials. People were starting to have screen memories. They would be moved up sort of a hollow kind of funnel in sort of a swirling energy mass up into the bottom of the craft. And on the way up, they might have screen memories of comforting images. They would find themselves on board the craft, and although they might have been initially frightened when they woke up and found these entities in their bedrooms, they might have attempted to flee before the paralysis set in, they were comforted when they were actually on board the craft. And then their memories were sometimes wiped out, probably in the majority of cases. Only about 30% of people remember the abduction experience itself. And I'm beginning to wonder if they are attempting to alter human DNA, if there's something that they're trying to remove from our DNA. And perhaps they're trying to move us along the evolutionary scale to become less bellicose, to maybe stop this tribal warfare and this greed that drives so many humans, this violence. That's only a hunch, but I wonder.
How would that happen since there are billions of us now? In other words, the DNA is already here. We already are who we are. Are you telling me they are trying to breed a new kind of human with different DNA? I mean, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, I think that they're actually trying to alter our genetic structure. There are many, many babies that are being born that seem to have different qualities. And they are less violent. They might not be terribly interested in football games or violent spectator sports, They might be